The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. This is The Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome to the Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. If you're a follower of the Roger Stone Show, you know that I have called the Russian collusion hoax the greatest single dirty trick in American political history. It is nothing less than a massive abuse of power in which Barack Obama and his administration used the full authority of the U.S. government and the extraordinary capabilities of our intelligence agencies, utilizing two pieces of quote-unquote evidence that they actually knew were fraudulent to try to undo the results of the 2016 election, when Donald Trump was most improbably elected president in an upset. One piece of fraudulent evidence, of course, was the famous Steele dossier. FBI General Counsel Andrew Weissman, later the de facto head of the Mueller witch hunt, and CIA Director James O. Brennan both knew that the Steele dossier had been fabricated and paid for after being commissioned by Hillary Clinton's campaign, but they nonetheless used it as the rationale for FISA warrants. Those are foreign intelligence warrants to spy on President Donald Trump's campaign, as well as some of his campaign aides, and the entirely false claim that the Democrat National Committee had been the target of an online hack by Russian intelligence. Another claim for which there is no evidence whatsoever. The real question is, this entire plot was born on July 28th, 2017, in an Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama himself, the chief perpetrator of this fraud, Vice President Joe Biden, who helpfully suggested that General Michael Flynn be charged under the Logan Act for having a conversation after he was designated as the National Security Advisor, but prior to his taking office, something that Barack Obama's National Security Advisor had done. National Security Advisor Susan Rice, FBI Director James Comey, CIA Director John O. Brennan, an admitted communist and Muslim convert, as well as James Clapper, then serving as the Director of National Intelligence. But Tulsi Gabbard, the Director of National Intelligence today, has declassified documents after a decades-long struggle that proves definitively that this entire thing was a politically motivated hit job. But the question to me is, will any of these people be held accountable? Will any of them be prosecuted for the seditious crime of treason? Because what they engaged in is no less than that. And I would make the case to you that this ongoing seditious conspiracy didn't end in 2017. It continued through the 2020 election. We anxiously await Tulsi Gabbard's declassification of documents regarding the voting machines and mail-in voting in the 2020 election, but continued into 2023 and 2024, culminating in the raid at Mar-a-Lago, which was very reminiscent of the raid on my home at 6 o'clock in the morning. Therefore, the grand jury can be convened in Fort Pierce, Florida, in the Southern District of Florida, where this continuing seditious conspiracy continued. Now President Trump finally seems to be out of patience. He's urging his Department of Justice to take action. A post yesterday on Truth Social kind of gave us that impression. He said, addressing the Attorney General, Pam, I have reviewed over 30 statements and posts saying that essentially same old story as last time, all talk, no action. Nothing is being done. What about Comey, Adam Schiff, Letitia James, the New York Attorney General? We'll be talking quite a bit about her today. They're all guilty as hell, but nothing's going to be done. Then, he said, we almost put a Democrat-supported U.S. attorney in Virginia with a really bad Republican past, a woke, rhino, anti-Trump Republican who was never going to do his job. That's why the two worst Democrat senators pushed him so hard. He even lied to the media and said he quit when, in fact, I fired him. And there is a great, great case against Letitia James, as many lawyers and legal pundits have said. Lindsay Halligan, that's the president's new appointment to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of Virginia, is a really good lawyer and likes you a lot. We cannot delay any longer. It's killing our reputation and our credibility. They impeached me twice. They indicted me 5 times over nothing. Justice must be served now. President DJT. To me, that is a clear message that the president is tired of this delay. It took the Russian hoaxsters in the Mueller investigation, in which Robert Mueller himself was completely non-compos mentis. He was around the bend. The epically evil Andrew Weissman. This is a federal prosecutor who got his start covering up mob murders in Brooklyn. Then he went on to the total and complete destruction of the Enron Corporation and their Big Five accounting firm, Arthur Andersen, only to be reversed in those convictions 9-0 by the Supreme Court. But this demented lunatic continues to point at the Enron case as the be-all and end-all, as if it is a gold standard. All it is a massive public humiliation. Then it was Andrew Weissman who had other Mueller investigators destroy the memories of their cell phones when they were subpoenaed by special counsel John Durham, who had been appointed to look into the origins of the Russian collusion hacks. I've seen a draft indictment on Andrew Weissman, 39 possible counts. If this guy escapes justice, well, then there is no justice in the world. We here in the Stone Zone and many other educated observers in the conservative movement have gone through the voluminous evidence showing conspiracy in the Russian collusion case. Again, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard has unclassified documents showing the conspiracy went all the way to the top, all the way up the food chain to Barack Hussein Obama. There are dozens who could be charged, but why aren't they? We understand that Attorney General Bondi should not be hasty in making these charges. There comes a time when enough is enough. We can escape no excuses. We must, with the president, demand justice, and these deep state crooks must be taking degrading perp walks, or America will never be great again. Even as we speak, a memorial for Turning Point founder Charlie Kirk is taking place right now, where over 300,000 people had showed up at last count to pay respects for the martyr who was gunned down because he refused to back down from publicly spreading the doctrine of Jesus Christ, free enterprise, capitalism, free speech, and the U.S. Constitution. Speakers at the memorial today include President Donald Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk. It was initially estimated that 100,000 people would attend, but it has already far exceeded those projections as patriots from across the country went to pay their respects to a man who was remembered among the most revered heroes of our age. As I said on Saturday while being interviewed by Alex Jones, I think with Barry Goldwater, From the ashes of his defeat rose the modern conservative movement that would go on to elect another great icon of the movement, Ronald W. Reagan, essentially forging the same coalition that Mitt Romney and John McCain could not assemble, but which Donald Trump did reassemble to not only be elected president, most improbably in 2016, but then to stage the greatest single comeback in American political history in 2024. Charlie Kirk's name will now go into the pantheon with those other greats. The murder of Charlie Kirk has shaken the public consciousness like few events in our history have done. The messaging is clear that nobody is backing down. The threats are only emboldening more people to speak out as they realize if they do not do so, and if they don't do the right thing now, it's only a matter of time before they and their families end up, sadly, like Kirk. There's also more unity among conservative and those on the right than ever before, focusing on eradicating the left and stopping their violent socialist agenda is top priority. That said, late this week I wrote a long piece in which I opposed the mass-based cancel culture and censorship that was imposed on us when the Democrats were in power. See, I'm a free speech absolutist. You can insult me all day on social media. I don't really care. There is, of course, a line between that and shouting fire in a crowded theater or making specific violent threats of people, extorting others to harm people. That's not free speech. That's dangerous. We will have to keep this mentality as we head into next year's midterms, where socialists can be put down at the ballot box and that we never have to revert or to the cartridge box. Charlie Kirk told me in private, in confidence, that he aspired not only to perhaps be governor of Arizona, but he thought and dreamed about a White House bid someday. I honestly think that he had the faith, the courage, the convictions, the principle, the drive, and the discipline to be not just a great presidential candidate, but he could have been a truly great president. But in the end, he may affect the direction of history even greater in death than he could have in life. I'm Roger Stone. You're tuned in to the Stone Zone here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Please don't go away because we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show, presented by Colonial Metals Group. Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. The Socialist Rifle Association, a group that claims to have 10,000 members, is training Marxist revolutionaries to be proficient in firing weapons as part of their coming warfare campaign against the U.S. Constitution and more broadly against the American people. SRA members have already been linked to at least 4 major crimes, including firebombing of Tesla dealerships. The SRA was known to promote hatred against Charlie Kirk, calling him an enemy to transgenders' rights. The FBI is currently investigating the Armed Queers of Utah, it's quite a name, to see if there are any ties to the Kirk shooting. There are hundreds of these left-wing terrorist groups are operating under the Antifa banner, but the bad news for them is that President Donald Trump only last week declared Antifa a known terrorist network, so now law enforcement can go about ferreting out who is financing this violence and mayhem against the American people, arresting them, prosecuting them, and de-weaponizing them. These folks must be treated as much of a threat as, say, ISIS. Republicans, Americans, none of us can survive without these subversives being allowed to function. Meanwhile, in reminding me of the Kennedy assassination, there are many observers, including yours truly, have questioned the official narrative regarding Charlie Kirk's assassination. One finding that has aroused suspicion is the fact that there's seemingly, if Kirk was shot from the front, as we are told, no exit wound in his back. You'll remember that they told us JFK was shot 3 times from the back. We now know definitively that John F. Kennedy was shot from both the front and the back, as documented in the new Paramount documentary, What the Parkland Shooters Saw. You can also find this in my book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Now, Andrew Colvett, the executive producer of Charlie Kirk's show, is attempting to explain away the fact that there was no exit wound on Charlie Kirk's back. After speaking to a surgeon who worked on Charlie Kirk at the hospital, Colvett said, "It is absolutely a miracle that someone else didn't get killed. His bone was so healthy and the density was so impressive that he's like the man of steel." So it appears to me, much like in the JFK situation, we have another magic bullet situation in our hands. I'm not sure if Mr. Colvett's words are going to stop the chatter about whether or not there is more than meets the eye regarding Charlie Kirk's brutal assassination, especially considering the alleged assassin shot Kirk, unassembled his rifle, reassembled his rifle, and then hid the rifle where it could easily be found. Then he jumped off the roof of the building with no rifle visible in the video film. The messages sent from the alleged killer to his transgendered lover seem a little too obvious and designed to provide a narrative. They look to me like they were written by AI. The fact that the killer changed out of his clothes on the roof only to change into the exact same clothes again later when it was time to be apprehended, that makes little sense either. There are many elements of the deep state who would not have been purged that hate Donald Trump and would not hesitate in setting up a sophisticated operation to hurt the MAGA movement. We do have to get to the bottom of this. The extent to which it reminds me both of John F. Kennedy's assassination and the attempted assassination of President Donald Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, gives me the chills. We'll be following it right here on The Roger Stone Show. Coming up, Sam Antar joins us to make the case as to why there's more than sufficient evidence to prosecute New York Attorney General Letitia James in an Eastern Virginia courtroom.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Whoa! That was a bop! Ooh, let's keep the party going with the Claptrap Public Domain Serenade! Happy birthday to you! Let's all loot and shoot! Ba-ba-doo-doo! Borderlands 4! Well, that kind of fell apart toward the end. But you get the idea. Borderlands 4 is out now! Buy it! Buy it, buy it, buy it!
Rated M for mature.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight? Aha! Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk create in Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
The Roger Stone Show. Entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is The Roger Stone Show,
presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is one of the most interesting and intelligent individuals I've ever met. Sam Antar is a former certified public accountant whose career trajectory took a strange turn because he went from perpetrator of perhaps the greatest single securities fraud scheme in American history, paid his debt to society, and reinvented himself as the country's foremost investigator of criminal fraud, particularly fraud by those in public office. His services are used by government agencies, law enforcement organizations, law firms and accounting firms, independent investment research firms, and hedge funds seeking the truth. He writes an incredible blog at whitecollarfraud.com, and Sam Antar is uniquely well positioned to help us parse the events of the last several days. Now, Sam Antar is actually the author of all of the original underlying research that proves, in my opinion, beyond a shadow of doubt, that New York Attorney General Letitia James, the woman who says no one is above the law, has engaged in a decades-long pattern of mortgage fraud, has ultimately either misreported or failed to report her accurate financial dealings in her New York State disclosure forms as required by law, and that there is indeed a more than viable fraud case, mortgage fraud against her, which the Trump administration is seeking to prosecute. Now, in the last week, the Washington Post, the New York Times, Bloomberg, Reuters, ABC, these are not, by the way, news outlets or journalistic enterprises. These are propaganda fronts for the hard left. Please remember when you read them, literally nothing they report is either true or accurate, not like the old days. But all of them have reported that the U.S. attorney in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is where Letitia James perpetrated her most recent mortgage fraud, has declined to prosecute, allegedly on the basis that there is no case against her. He then subsequently said that he resigned his position under pressure by the Trump administration when in fact he was fired. How he became the U.S. attorney is an interesting story. He was the only quote-unquote Republican, an anti-Trump Republican, by the way, who U.S. Senator Mark Warner and the other Senator Tim Kaine, who was Hillary Clinton's running mate for vice president, would agree to under the Senate tradition of U.S. senators giving a blue slip, which is tacit approval, or at least acquiescence in the appointment of U.S. attorney. Mark Warner's an interesting guy. He got caught texting with a representative for Christopher Steele, the British intelligence agency who wrote the phony Steele dossier. In his message, he specifically says he'd like to meet with Steele, but he doesn't want to leave any paper trail, which tells me that Mark Warner, despite how wealthy and powerful may be, needs to be dragged before a grand jury along with Comey, Clapper, Brennan, Rice, Biden, and all the others, and he too should be charged because he's involved in this criminal conspiracy. His Senate Intelligence Committee claims that there's substantial evidence of Russian collusion when there is none. He makes 5 factual false statements about me. I'd sue him because he's quite wealthy and I could use the money, but unfortunately he's protected by senatorial immunity. Anytime, Senator, you want to waive that, be happy to see you in court because you are a progenitor and a purveyor of lies. In any event, to get back to the main point, in the wake of President Trump firing Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney, he has Lindsay Halligan, who's an attorney I actually know. She's actually from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a very, very smart and capable attorney who's going to prosecute this case. So now I turn to my guest, Sam Antar. Sam, they say there is no case against Letitia James. How do you respond to that?
Absolutely false. First of all, the media is saying, let's break it down. There's two properties. There's a property in Brooklyn and there's a property in Virginia, Norfolk, Virginia. The Norfolk, Virginia property mortgage was being investigated by Eric Siebert. Okay, the Norfolk property. Okay, she took out a mortgage with her niece, bought the property with her niece, and the mortgage documents say that she is going to be the primary resident. What's going on is that the press says, well, every other document says the opposite. Well, let's look at the timeline, okay? August 2nd, she tells her broker, I'm not going to be the primary resident. August 3rd, the broker responds, you're right. I put down on the mortgage that you're not going to be the primary resident. Then you count 14 days on August 17th as a power of attorney claiming that she is going to be the primary resident. The power of attorney, the lie, came after she told the truth. This is not the lie before she told the truth. So the point being is that she lied after she told the truth. Now, let's take that 14-day gap from August 3rd to August 17th. You got the application that says she's not going to be the primary residence, and then you have this power of attorney that says she is going to be the primary residence. Okay, first of all, the power of attorney was filed with the mortgage. It was never corrected. That was the governing document. Now, in that 14-day period, okay, the lender processed her loan through the automated underwriting system, AUS. Okay, that system will bounce anybody that doesn't qualify for the loan. What probably happened during that period is that her loan got bounced. In other words, her loan application was not accepted maybe 1, 2, 10, 20 times. I don't know. But the point is, she put that assertion that she was going to be the primary residence after her loan was probably bounced. In other words, she needed it to get the loan done. This was not an accident. This was not a clerical error. Now, the press tries to say, well, you know, they only talk about the Virginia property as if it's an isolated incident. It's not. She has a history of mortgage fraud going back to 1983 when my dear friend Joel Gilbert said that she bought a house with a father-daughter, but did the mortgage as husband-wife. Okay, so what they're trying to do is they're trying to take this one case in isolation, ignore the other cases as if they don't exist, and say, oh, it's only this case, and the power of attorney was a mistake. It's all a bunch of baloney. It's all a bunch of misdirection. Just follow the evidence. You want to claim you're an enemy of Donald Trump, it's political retribution. The issue isn't political retribution or being an enemy of Donald Trump, because none of that gives you immunity from committing crimes. If you commit a crime, you deserve to be prosecuted, period. I don't care if Trump likes you or hates you.
Well, I should point out that it is only because Bill Pulte, who is the director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, and the professionals in this agency examined all of these documents on which they are expert, and they concluded that she had engaged in mortgage fraud, and they very properly made a referral to the U.S. Department of Justice. That's the way it works. By the way, hundreds, if not thousands of people are prosecuted every year for mortgage fraud. It's just that you don't hear about it because they're not famous or prominent. The truth is, Bill Pulte is the only one currently in the Trump administration who's actually trying to hold these big, powerful political elites accountable for their illegal actions. And he didn't make up these charges. The professionals at Fannie and Freddie and the Federal Housing Finance Agency, people who do this for a living, looked at the facts, looked at the documents, and reached the same conclusions that Sam Antar has reached. The other thing that I find interesting is the other day is when Letitia James, in an interview, I think it was with that intellectual giant Joy Reid, said the prosecution of mortgage fraud is very, very, very rare. Really? Letitia James prosecuted Donald Trump under a state law in which no one has ever been prosecuted, claiming falsely that he had inflated the value of his assets in order to qualify for commercial real estate loans, which he paid back in full with interest on time. The lenders made $48 million. No one has ever been prosecuted under that crime. That's how rare it is. But once again, Letitia James does not hold herself to the same standard that she holds Donald Trump to. One of the questions I have here is one simply of logic. If everything you say is true, and I know it having gone to your website, whitecollarfraud.com, where you very recently completely recapped the case against Letitia James, in essence, to answer the falsehoods promulgated by the Washington Post, the New York Times, Bloomberg, ABC, and others. Is it not likely that there are downstream crimes? In other words, if she did perpetrate these mortgage crimes, are not there likely, we won't know, of course, but how did she handle this in her tax returns? How was this property insured? If this is an overall fraud, does that include, therefore, wire fraud when she received the funds? I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to these questions, but it is a question of logic. No, Sam?
Yes, there's a whole Pandora's box of lies, okay? We can go to the Virginia property where she falsely stated that she was going to be a primary resident. We can go to the New York property in Brooklyn where she falsely stated in 10 mortgages that she had less than 5 units. Instead of having 5 units, which she really has according to the certificate of occupancy. We can go to the tax returns and see if she properly deducted her mortgage expense or improperly deducted it. We can also go to the insurance policies and see if she took out a commercial versus a residential policy. We can also see if there were any claims based, trip and fall claims based on a residential policy when she should have had a commercial policy and the insurance company had to defend her and pay up on it. It goes on and on and on. We can look at the mortgage brokers themselves. We can look at the closing attorneys. We can look at the appraisers. And out of all of this, there's about 50 to 60 people that need to be interviewed. They claim they interviewed 15, but of course they didn't say who they interviewed. They could have interviewed the cleaning lady. I don't know who they interviewed. But the point being is that the documents speak for themselves. With every representation she made on every mortgage she took since 1983, whether it's a Queens property with a dad, whether it's the Brooklyn property by herself, whether it's the Virginia property, every single one contained false information. This isn't a one-off. This isn't a mistake. This is a pattern. And for a prosecutor not to recognize it, maybe I should go back to a life of crime. Because if that's the caliber of prosecutors we have today, no wonder why this country is going to crap.
I must say she's in deep trouble. One signal that she's in deep trouble is she's retained Abby Lowell to represent her. He's got a track record for Hunter Biden, for the late Senate Majority Leader Joe Bruno, for my friend Senator Bob Torricelli. This guy is the worst lawyer in American history. He obviously will sign his name to anything, no matter how irresponsible or how false. I'd be nervous if he were my lawyer. You're tuned in to the Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Audio Networks. Don't go away, because we'll be right back with Sam Antar, fraud investigator extraordinaire.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Presented by Colonial Metals Group.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. We're still talking to Sam Antar. Sam Antar is the publisher of whitecollarfraud.com. whitecollarfraud.com, his blog, in which he specializes in exposing epic fraud on behalf of some of our most important elected officials, Republicans and Democrats. Sam, by the way, I should point out, is not a Republican, not a Trump supporter, not part of the MAGA movement. What he is an incredible investigative reporter who publishes the actual documents he refers to. So if you go to his terrific work at whitecollarfraud.com, you can click on the hyperlinked portions and see the actual documents he refers to. That's why we know that when Letitia James tries to say, oh, this was a one-time typographical error, well, that is simply not true. Sam, one thing I want to ask you about in the time that we have left is when you're an elected official, say the Attorney General of New York, you can't claim that a domicile in Virginia is your principal legal residence, because under the New York State Constitution, you must be a resident of New York in order to be Attorney General, no?
That is correct. And also, may I add, she claimed it was going to be her principal residence weeks before Donald Trump was put on trial. And she was sitting there every day of the trial. Now, with that in mind, okay, she has the, what was I going to say? With that in mind, there's also a second document that's false that we missed out on, okay? You have the power of attorney stating that she's going to be a Virginia resident. The mortgage itself, which is the second document, states that she has to move into the property within 6 months. So there are two mortgages, there are two items that are false, okay? So what she basically did was, okay, she got kicked out of the AUS system, the automated underwriting system, and had to claim that she was a primary resident to get that mortgage through, because her finances were not good, to be nice to her, because she had multiple mortgages on multiple properties and limited income, and now she's buying another property.
By the way, later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Joel Gilbert, who's a documentary film maker as well as an investigative researcher. He's uncovered the fact that Letitia James is not only currently violating the New York City rent stabilization laws, but that in the home in Norfolk, Virginia that she obtained, she's harboring a fugitive from justice for whom there are several warrants in North Carolina. Strange for a law enforcement official, in this case the highest law enforcement official in the state of New York, to be harboring a criminal at the home that she obtained under illegal and false circumstances. So Joel Gilbert will be joining us a little later in the show to talk about that. Final quick point here, Sam. When you're the Attorney General of New York, you have to file a full disclosure with the state of New York. We have less than a minute here. In one word, how would you characterize Letitia James's filings?
Okay, false for every year that she's filed since 2019 or 18, give or take. Every single financial disclosure that she's made to New York State contains false information. It omits mortgages. It includes mortgages that were not recorded. It excludes properties like the Virginia property. It excludes the Virginia mortgage when it should. false, 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 and false. Everything she puts her pen on, and I have thoroughly documented, is false.
All right, go to whitecollarfraud.com, whitecollarfraud.com. You can see for yourself that everything Sam Antar tells us today is deadly accurate. You're tuned in to The Roger Stone Show, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to The Roger Stone Show. I just got an email at askstone@rogerstoneshow.com from Annette in Queens. Annette says, what, no recipe today? Annette, I'm not going to disappoint. A little later in the show, I'm going to give you my mother's recipe for meatloaf Hungarian style. So those who keep track of these things, if you want to grab a pen and paper, now is the time. A little later in the show, we're going to have that recipe from the Stone family recipe box for you. Joining me now is John Carney. He is the economics and finance editor at Breitbart News, where he leads their coverage of business, markets, and economic policy. Before joining Breitbart, John Carney built an extensive career in financial journalism. He worked for CNBC, covering Wall Street and finance, reported for the Wall Street Journal, and served as editor-in-chief of Dealbreaker.com. He also oversaw the Wall Street and economics section of the Business Insider. His reporting has appeared in the New York Times, Fortune, New York Magazine, and the New York Post, among others. But he also has an extensive background in law. A graduate of the University of Pennsylvania's Law School, he practiced at 2 prestigious law firms, and in that role, he represented banks, hedge funds, and private equity firms, giving him firsthand experience in the financial industry that would later inform his journalistic career. Beyond the newsroom, John Carney's been a frequent guest and commentator on finance, on economics, but this is his first time on the Roger Stone Show. I called John and asked him to be on the show today because, well, I think Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is among President Trump's very best appointees. Scott Bessent is an outside-the-box thinker. He's a strong supporter of cryptocurrency. He's a libertarian. He's a shrewd analyst of the markets. He's a strong believer in gold, and he's a brilliant negotiator. He is, in my opinion, among the president's best appointees. But this week in Bloomberg, there was an effort to smear Scott Bessent, the Secretary of the Treasury, essentially trying to equate his mortgage and ownership of actually 4 homes with the mortgage fraud perpetrated by Dr. Lisa Cook, who got caught red-handed, claiming that 2 different residents were her principal primary legal residence, thus getting a tax break, a lower insurance rate, and a lower mortgage rate on both properties. John Carney wrote a brilliant rebuttal for Breitbart.news, telling us why the situation surrounding Scott Bessent's mortgage is completely and totally unlike that surrounding Dr. Lisa Cook. And I welcome him into this Roger Stone Show now. John, welcome.
Yep, thank you, Roger. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for having me on the show.
So I want you to break this down for us because this is typical of the left's whataboutism. We know that Dr. Lisa Cook, a member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, very clearly, based on, again, the research of Sam Antar, the guest who just left us, engaged in mortgage fraud, claiming that 2 different properties would be her principal primary legal residence. As I say, getting a tax break from the state, getting a lower mortgage rate, a lower insurance rate. Turns out she had a third property, which she alternatively calls a second home. Other times she calls it an investment property. The situation surrounding Secretary Besson is completely and totally different based on what I read in your piece. So break this down for us, if you would.
That's absolutely right. When you get a mortgage and you describe the home as your primary residency, usually what you have to do is you have to move in within 60 days, and you have to have it be your primary residence for at least a year. And you can only have one of these. It often means that you get a lower rate. It definitely means you get lower fees, particularly if the mortgage is going to be later sold on to something like Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And Lisa Cook's mortgages, the problem is she got mortgages from different financial institutions within a few weeks of each other, and they were both written down as primary residences. So she received a financial benefit for doing this, and it's very hard to believe that she somehow forgot she already had one primary residence. The banks, as far as we can tell, did not have any clue that she was calling two different homes her primary residence. What happened with Scott Besson? He does have a few homes. He has one in New York City that is his primary residence. It was before he became Treasury Secretary. Now, I guess his primary residence is in Washington, D.C. But he had a home in Westchester and Bedford Hills, and another in Massachusetts. He went to his bank, which is Bank of America, and they're his private bank. They hold all of his money, so they know exactly where he lives and what his primary residence is. And they did a deal in which they lent him a total of $21 million for these two homes that he was buying. And and the mortgage documents that got filed, they do say that each of these is checked off as there's a attestation that these will be my primary residence. And that's what Bloomberg focused on. They looked at that, but what they ignored was the fact that there's a letter agreement, and the mortgage documents say this has to be my primary residence unless I have in writing from my bank an agreement that says they don't have to be. And as Treasury Secretary Scott Besson, when he got these mortgages way back in 2007, he got that letter. That letter exists. Bank of America has said they absolutely were not under any they weren't being defrauded. They weren't being fooled. They knew that he did not plan to use these two homes. They're not investment properties. He was going to use them as residences for himself, as far as I can tell. But he wasn't trying to fool the bank. The bank wasn't fooled. There is a letter that the bank wrote that said, no, this is all on the up and up. We know exactly what these are. And the mortgages are, frankly, so big, they weren't going to be sold on to be, bundled into a mortgage-backed security. So there was no extra fees attached for the, not calling them primary residences. That didn't matter. This is, Scott Besson's private bank, Bank of America, doing a very bespoke deal for a guy who had millions and millions of dollars in the bank with them. And by the way, those mortgages got paid off. They were, they never ended up a problem, and nobody was deceived. Bloomberg's story made it seem as if Scott Besson's mortgages were just like Lisa Cook's. They're nothing alike at all.
Yeah, the situation surrounding Lisa Cook is really quite amazing. She applies for the second mortgage within weeks of the first. So she can't, it's not a mistake. She doesn't know.
That's right.
She hasn't forgotten that she previously, just 2 weeks earlier, claimed that a property in Ann Arbor, Michigan was her principal legal residence. Then she claimed that a property outside of Atlanta was. They can't both be. Then the president terminates her from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors for cause, which I believe he has the right to do. By the way, 3 previous Federal Reserve Board governors resigned from the position when they were just under investigation, prior to their being charged or referred to the Justice Department. Then she sues in the District of Columbia, claiming that the president doesn't have the right to terminate her. But the clerk of courts, one Angela Caesar, refers the case to a federal judge, Gia Cobb, who's a member of the same Black Women's College sorority as Dr. Cook, which to me is a blatant conflict of interest, one that should have eliminated or caused Judge Cobb to recuse herself. Needless to say, she did not, because this is the District of Columbia, where I can tell you firsthand the Constitution, the law, the rules, the facts, the evidence, none of those things matter. Not in the District of Columbia. That case, of course, was found, Judge Cobb found for Lisa Cook. There's a big surprise. Then it went to the D.C. Court of Appeals. They upheld the ruling by Judge Cobb. Of course they did. It's the same court who upheld the unconstitutional gag order on me when I was standing trial, having been framed in the Russian collusion hoax. Once again, it has nothing to do with the law. It has to do with a political agenda. Why should we care? Here's why we should care. Because the Federal Reserve had a meeting last week in which they voted on the question of whether to cut interest rates. And Dr. Cook got to vote in that meeting. I think she should have been disallowed. She should have the good taste and judgment to resign, but she refuses to do so. I'm in favor of the repeal of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 entirely, but hey, that's just me. When we come back, John, given your extensive background covering financial issues, I'd like to get your opinion on the Fed and whether this 1/4 point cut was sufficient based on the current economic data regarding inflation and unemployment. To me, it's Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, who's acting politically, not the president, who, like every president, has been jawboning for an interest rate cut when he thinks it is the right thing for the economy. To me, it looks like the Federal Reserve is just trying to slow down the Trump boom, which seems to be happening anyway. You're listening to The Roger Stone Show here on the Red Apple Audio Networks. We're talking to John Carney, the economics and finance editor of Breitbart News, and we'll be back with more political and financial news on the other side. So please don't go away. You're in The Roger Stone Show right here in Red Apple Audio Networks, and we'll be right back.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This episode is brought to you by KPMG. Making an impact is how KPMG helps make the difference. KPMG applies advanced tools and strategic thinking to convert data into actionable knowledge and deliver value by improving performance through transformation, modernizing processes with technology, harnessing the power of data, navigating complex M&A transactions, and enhancing trust among stakeholders. Go to kpmg.us/advisory to learn more. KPMG. Make the difference.
Leading a business today means constantly adapting. On the Executive Insights podcast, brought to you by AWS, global leaders share how they're making tough calls, testing bold ideas, and putting innovation into practice, generative AI included. If you're looking for real stories behind what's working, this is it. Subscribe to the Executive Insights podcast today, available now on all major podcast platforms.
I'm Ashley Graham, and as a parent, I know the back-to-school transition can be a lot. When it comes to wellness, Ollie supports me and my family through it all. Kids Multi is big in my house. It supports their immune system, and they love to take it. A win-win for everyone. Shop these products at ollie.com or retailers nationwide. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Presented by Colonial Metals Group.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. In just a minute, we're going to have that recipe for meatloaf Hungarian style, so be ready to jot it down. But before we do that, I want to ask our guest, John Carney, who's the economics and finance editor at Breitbart News, his opinion on the Federal Reserve's decision this past week to cut interest rates by 1/4 point. John?
They made a terrible mistake. They're behind the curve. They should have cut months ago, and they're playing catch up now. Trump's new appointee to the Federal Reserve, Stephen Myron, he said that they should have cut by 50 basis points, and that seems right to me. They need to. They have 2 more meetings this year. They should actually cut by 50 or 75 basis points in October. Unfortunately, it looks like they're going to cut 25. You're absolutely right. Lisa Cook should have stepped down. Everybody else in her position would have stepped down. We've had Fed governors, Fed presidents be investigated, and they stepped down under investigation, even though later they were cleared. But they thought that the institution of the Fed was important enough that they wouldn't stay in place. Lisa Cook has decided that she's the one who's important, and frankly, Jerome Powell should tell her that she should at least sit out the meetings while this process gets litigated. Look, if she wins in the end, which I do not believe she will, the Supreme Court will eventually say, yes, President Trump can remove her. But while this is going on, she should not be tainting the Federal Reserve with her influence while still under investigation.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Also, new reports this week of plagiarism in her past. So this is not somebody of pristine character. I often wonder whether she is not just, in fact, a DEI hire for the Federal Reserve. But you're right. I wish she had the good judgment to step down. Unfortunately, this is not about the good of the country. It's not about the institution of the Federal Reserve. It's all about her. All right, I want to thank our guest, John Carney, the economics and finance editor of Breitbart News, for his incisive analysis of the smear job on one of President Trump's very best appointments, Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. Thank you, John.
Thank you very much for having me, Roger.
All right, I promise this to you. Here it is. My mother's, by the way, it was her birthday on Friday. She would have been 90 years old. Gloria Rose Stone. Here is her recipe. You're going to need 1 pound of ground beef, ground round specifically, 2 whole eggs, half tablespoon of salt, 1 medium onion grated, 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, 4 slices of dry bed soaked and drained. You mix all those ingredients thoroughly. You form them into a loaf and bake it for 1 1/4 hours at 375 degrees. Now, to make the sauce, you take 1 small can of tomato sauce, you dilute it with about 1.5 cans of water, 1 tablespoon of sugar, you bring that to a boil, then you add 1 tablespoon of flour and 1/2 pint of sour cream, which you have mixed together. Then you add that to the tomato sauce, stirring slowly. Let it come to a boil, then turn it off. That is the gravy you use on the greatest Hungarian meatloaf you have ever had in your entire life. Often like to say that I'm very proud of my heritage. I'm half Italian and half Hungarian. I'm Italian from the waist down. Now, it's amazing how popular my mother's and therefore my grandmother's recipes have been. I'm going to be producing a cookbook soon, the Stone Zone WABC cookbook. We'll have it available for you online. I'm going to give these away. I'm going to give these away because my mother's recipes live on. Thanks for joining us. Coming up next, Joel Gilbert, documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist. He's going to show us how New York Attorney General Letitia James is violating the New York City rent stabilization laws and how she's harboring a dangerous criminal in her illegally mortgaged home in Virginia.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This is the Roger Stone Show.
Presented by Colonial Metals Group.
A man who's gone through hell, but he's kept going, and he's smart, and he's strong, and people love him. Not everybody, but people love him and respect him. Roger Stone.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. Joining me now is Joel Gilbert. Joel Gilbert is a documentary film producer. He is an investigative journalist. He's also a musician, performing artist, and a true mensch. He is known for his many documentary films in politics, including Dreams from My Real Father, The Art of the Insult, hysterical film about Donald Trump, and his famous film on Michelle Obama. Of all of his films, my favorite is, of course, Banished, the untold story of Danny Williams, who was the abandoned African-American son of William Jefferson Clinton. But Joel has really distinguished himself in terms of his research into New York Attorney General Letitia James. I consider Sam Antar, who joined us earlier on the Roger Stone Show, and Joel Gilbert kind of the Batman and Robin of this drama. Their coverage of Letitia James has been on the money. Joel often writes for the Gateway Pundit, and he's had a number of extraordinarily incisive pieces there. One that I saw very recently that interested me the most showed that not only did New York Attorney General Letitia James, the highest law enforcement officer in the state of New York, fraudulently obtain a mortgage to obtain a home in Virginia, but according to Joel Gilbert, she's actually harboring a wanted fugitive at that property. Joel, welcome to the Roger Stone Show. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, great to be here, Roger. Well, it didn't take too much research. It started with Letitia, of course. She responded to Sam Antar, revealing that she had purchased this home by falsely claiming it would be her primary residence in order to qualify for a lower residential loan. Letitia responded by coming publicly and saying, I bought that house with my niece because I wanted to provide a home for her children, wanting sympathy, essentially, that she's trying to help kids. Well, I simply Googled it and found out the two kids are actually adult criminal felons. One of the adults, named Monique Thompson, has a rap sheet including convictions for 20 years for abusing a child, possession of burglary tools, third-degree burglary, assault and battery, you name it, resisting arrest. And I found out that she's actually wanted in the state of North Carolina. She has an outstanding warrant for absconding. You can go right to the website for Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Forsyth County. Monique Thompson is wanted on a warrant for absconding her parole. Now, it was Letitia that said she bought the house for her niece's children, and if you look up Monique Thompson, she lives there. So this is very serious. It wasn't enough for Letitia to commit one crime. She made the house a whole crime scene because she knows her niece's daughter is wanted. She has a very close relationship with her. And there is very serious penalties, including a federal and state crime for harboring a fugitive. So there's just no excuse. Letitia, we've got her crime after crime. I'm happy that Trump appointed a new prosecutor in Virginia because they have to look into this. Letitia just cannot be above the law anymore.
Excellent point. Sam Antar very effectively on today's show refuted this new fake news media claim that there is no evidence of mortgage fraud, or there's insufficient evidence of mortgage fraud. You recently uncovered the fact that she, who insists to everybody that no one is above the law, is actually violating the New York City rent stabilization laws, even as we speak. But before we get into that, let's talk about the mortgage situation.
Yeah, look, I chronicled on Gateway Pundit that since March that Letitia James took out a series of mortgages on her apartment building. She purchased a 4-story apartment building with 5 units in Brooklyn in 2001, and ever since then she's taken out a series of mortgages where she falsely claims it's only 4 units. And the reason she does that is because if you have 4 or less units, you qualify for a residential mortgage rate with very low closing costs and lower interest rates. If you have 5 or more units, it's a commercial loan with very high closing costs. She even, I revealed recently on Gateway Pundit, in 2021, she got a credit line mortgage, which is a regular mortgage, for $200,000, claiming the building only had 1 unit. So Letitia has made the case in Donald Trump's lawsuit against him that any mistake whatsoever is a grave crime and has to be prosecuted to protect the integrity of the system. So Letitia has just made every single loan a fraudulent mortgage, including with the U.S. government in 2011. She took out a loan. She had a 10% adjustable rate. On the back of the American taxpayer, she got a 2.7% government loan to get rid of her 10% loan by falsely claiming that she had a financial hardship, even though she was making $14,000 a month, and by falsely claiming she had 4 units. The loan wasn't even available if you had over 4 units. So in researching that, I've been writing about it, and every time I take a look at Letitia's mortgages, and they're all online. New York is an open record state. Every time I think I'm done with her mortgages, I say, let me take a look at it again. And every time I look at it, I find another crime. So the latest crime is that I found out she should have been registered with rent stabilization ever since she bought the building. Rent stabilization is a law in New York, and what it does is it prevents landlords from raising the rent too high, too quickly. It prevents eviction abuses, and you're only allowed to raise your rent by 3% per year at the most. So Letitia should have been registered all these years, and the way I found that out was in 1969, New York City passed a law that any building built before 1974 and having more than 5 units was subject to rent stabilization. So the last certificate of occupancy, which is the only controlling authority for unit count for Letitia's building, was in 1961, prior to the passage of this law in 1969. In 1961, her building had an official designation of 7 units. It was broken up into 7 apartments. So in 1969, her building was permanently in the rent stabilization program. There's a law that says you cannot simply redo the number of units and get out of the program. You're in it forever. So Letitia has been someone who has constantly said that she wants to protect homeowner rights. She's actually sued companies to defend the rent stabilization laws in New York. But it turns out she herself has been violating them. So you can't look at anything she's done in the real estate business without finding a crime. And I don't know how this can't be prosecuted. Now, in the state of New York, if you violate the rent stabilization laws like Letitia did, it actually goes to the Office of the New York State Attorney General for prosecution. So Letitia herself would have to recuse herself, because she is subject to this law, and she's tried to avoid it for 24 years now.
It's really quite extraordinary. As I think it was Sam Antar said, this is not a one-time typographical error. I mean, she's tried to minimize her culpability here. She's hired Abby Lowell, who could be the worst lawyer in America. I mean, Abby Lowell represented my friend Joe Bruno, who was the New York Senate Majority Leader. He was charged in an absurd, politically motivated case in which the U.S. Justice Department claimed that he had gotten a cut rate price on a broken down racehorse, which was true, but they couldn't prove that the man who'd given him the cut rate price had received anything in return from it, certainly no governmental contract or service. But because he went to a highly politicized court and in front of an epically corrupt judge, he was convicted on all counts, represented by Abby Lowell. The U.S. Supreme Court threw out Joe Bruno's conviction, but then, oddly enough, the U.S. attorney re-indicted him when he went to trial a second time. The second time, he fired Abby Lowell. He retained a local criminal defense attorney in the Albany area, and he was acquitted on all counts. I also had my own recent run-in with Abby Lowell, who wrote me a letter during his representation of Hunter Biden, telling me, I guess because I had been a critic of Hunter Biden on this show and also on my website, stonezone.com, that he told me that I should preserve all my records regarding Hunter Biden's laptop. Well, that would be exactly zero, other than maybe the links to stories in the New York Post or Breitbart News where I first learned about Hunter Biden's laptop. I guess this was meant to silence me as a critic of Hunter Biden. So I think that she's in very deep trouble if that's her lawyer. She seems to think that with the help of ABC, NBC, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Bloomberg, one of the worst, all of these journalistic outlets that are in fact progenitors of propaganda and Democrat Party talking points, that she can evade justice in this case. I don't think it's going to happen. I know Lindsay Halligan, the woman who the president appointed late yesterday to serve, I guess, as the interim U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. It's very clear to me that Eric Siebert, who says he resigned, was fired. He was fired because he refused to follow the evidence. This was a simple question of following the evidence. Joe, you have a major piece coming out, which is a prosecution memo that outlines the crimes of Letitia James. This will be public tomorrow, as I understand it. I've taken a look at the draft you sent me. This is a comprehensive roadmap for anybody out there who believes today that there's no evidence whatsoever regarding any wrongdoing by Letitia James. You have the specific act and the specific law that she's violated in this incredible crime spree that seems to go back at least 23 years.
Well, it's really 40 years.
Go ahead.
Yeah, look, I put together this thing. It's called a prosecution memorandum. You'll see it on the Gateway Pundit tomorrow. Prosecution memorandum, it's an internal legal document that prosecutors prepare that summarizes the facts and the law to decide if they're going to bring criminal charges. So I created this as a mock-up as an incentive for prosecutors because, as you probably know, I'm a little concerned about Pam Bondi because of my research into the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman case. It was Pam Bondi that did a woke prosecution. She was the Attorney General of the state of Florida, and she prosecuted George Zimmerman even though he clearly engaged in an act of self-defense. He was exonerated by the police, and it was Pam Bondi that caved in to the mob scene on the street and prosecuted Zimmerman, and as a result, Black Lives Matter was founded, and she didn't really have a backbone in that case. So I've always been concerned about her, and I did put together this memo, and in this memo, I go through step-by-step all the evidence of everything that Letitia James has done. She has even a RICO charge that I think could be made because she has a consistent pattern of misrepresentation of fraud and fraud spanning 4 decades. She has always exploited every mortgage classification to get better interest rates. She's exploited government programs. She pretended to marry her father to get lower interest rates, all to get personal benefit and undermine the financial system. So it's been repeated for 40 years, including the Virginia residents, the Citizens Bank loan in 2021. I think there's continuity and intent for illicit financial gain. So we've got all these individual crimes that I've laid out. You're going to see it tomorrow in the Gateway Pundit. We've got violations of federal law, false statements to financial institutions, bank fraud, mail-in wire fraud, RICO, federal laws against harboring a fugitive. We've got state laws for residential mortgage fraud she violated. We've got a scheme to defraud, pattern and continuity. It's all there. So I think any prosecutor could have taken my first article about Letitia James back in March and probably been able to charge her. But we've got now a complete investigation, and I've created this document. I think any prosecutor can follow this, and they've got to stop this crime spree of Letitia James that she's been engaging in for so long.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, then we'll be back with more of Joel Gilbert right here on The Roger Stone Show.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Roger Stone Show.
Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
They went after a guy named Roger Stone, who's sitting in the office. And I'll say this in front of Roger, he's no baby. And right now, he's cleaner than anybody in this place. No, they treated him very unfairly.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone.
Roger Stone.
This is The Roger Stone Show.
Presented by Colonial Metals Group.
Now, here's Roger Stone.
And we're back. We're talking to Joel Gilbert, documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist, writing recently for the Gateway Pundit. Joel, over the last couple of days, in the wake of the horrific, brutal political assassination of my friend Charlie Kirk, I saw Barack Obama put out a statement in which he opposed censorship, which I found interesting because our mutual friend Roseanne Barr immediately responded by saying, remember when you and your wife told Bob Iger that I should be knocked off of network television? I thought it was the perfect comment. You've just finished and released a documentary film on Roseanne Barr, the great Roseanne Barr. Tell us about it and tell folks where they can get it.
Okay, so first of all, you can see the movie trailer and link up to watch the movie on live stream, like Amazon Prime, Apple TV, YouTube Movies. Go to RoseanneIsAmerica.com. RoseanneIsAmerica.com. You can find the movie everywhere. Now, I did think a lot about this because Charlie Kirk being shot by a leftist trying to silence him was not much different from what they did to Roseanne Barr. She was kind of the first victim of cancel culture back in 2018, the biggest victim. She was a Trump supporter in real life and a Trump supporter on TV. And she was also a lifelong civil rights activist. She always promoted African Americans and causes, and she put out a very funny tweet about Valerie Jarrett and the Iran deal, and Obama's wife and Obama and Bob Iger jumped on it and said, "Oh, did you know that Valerie Jarrett was 10% black?" And Roseanne said, "Well, no, I thought she was Iranian. She was born in Iran. She's white." And they said, "Too bad, we're going to cancel you." So that was not much different from shooting Charlie Kirk. It's eliminating a conservative voice because they can't stand dialogue. Leftists don't want to have any dialogue. It really was the Obama years where political opposition turned into something that Democrats and leftists called hate. Anytime people disagree with Obama, they said, "Oh, that's because of racism. You must be bigoted if you don't want Obamacare." So that's kind of where it started. So the left looked at Roseanne Barr and said, "Oh, if you support Trump, that's hate." That's exactly what this this idiot did in shooting Charlie Kirk. He said he didn't want the hate. So go back and look at Roseanne's movie. You can see her tell her whole life story, how she got into comedy. It's a hilarious movie. She's still very, very funny. And you learn about the cancel culture and how she persevered. So go to RoseanneIsAmerica.com, watch the trailer, and it'll guide you where to watch the movie online, RoseanneIsAmerica.com.
All right. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I want to thank all my guests today, the great Sam Antar. Check out his whitecollarfraud.com for all the specifics. John Carney, the finance and business editor for the Breitbart News, and my good friend and fellow mensch, Joel Gilbert, who has done incredible reporting on Letitia James, and who has just produced this great documentary on Roseanne Barr. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show. We're here every Sunday from 3 to 5 Eastern. You can always find us also at WABCRadio.com. Until next weekend, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?